Hi, Sanna.
Hi there.
Hey.
Hey.
Maybe let's start a little bit with your personal journey. You've had quite a few roles throughout your career. You've been an advisor, an investor, a CEO, an LP, board member, chairwoman. I think the list can go on and on.
Confusing?
Yeah, or impressive. But now you've actually just started your next step as a founder. How come you went down that route?
I guess I'm a bit of a kind of accidental founder. There was this huge opportunity and something that needed to be done in the climate space, and there was no one else to do it. So I was kind of looking over my shoulder thinking, who's going to run with this one? And there was no one there, so I did it.
You did it. That's the right attitude. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on this kind of moment where you got the idea and realized that, I have to do this?
It all started actually with a lunch. I was up at the H&M headquarters in Stockholm to see a couple of senior guys there who I know from other things that I do, and they wanted to pick my brain given that I was working with companies like Stegra or H2 Green Steel and Northvolt and other climate scale-ups. They wanted to pick my brain on what it took to create a large industrial scale solution, a climate solution for the textile industry. And after that lunch, I kind of went back to the office and I just couldn't quite let go of the fact that this industry needs it so desperately. So talked to the Vargas guys, Harald Mix, Karl-Erik Lagercrantz, that I do a bunch of work with, kind of tried the idea with them, and they were like, yeah, there's probably something here. We went back to see the main owner of H&M also the following week, and off we went with no idea what we were going to do, but we just saw an industry that desperately needed it, and they needed it at scale, and we were hoping that we could find something to do.
Very cool. And now it's been a couple of years since this very kind of light bulb moment, and we'll go back to this journey a little bit. But could you maybe share like a few of the realizations or surprises in terms of being a founder versus your previous roles?
It was a bit over 3 years ago, actually, that lunch. It was in October 21. And it has not been a straight line, obviously. In the beginning, it didn't really dawn on me that I was going to be part of creating a company. But first of all, we kind of looked at the industry and tried to think of how can you actually make maximum impact. If you want to start one company in the textile industry and maximize impact, what do you actually address? What do you do? Because the textile industry has multiple problems in so many parts of the value chain. And in the end, we focused in on polyester pretty rapidly, and then tried to kind of look at, can this be done? Can you create something at scale? What is required? How much CO2 does it actually abate? But we didn't have a technology, and I guess that's the most common way, that you have a technology and then you scale it. Yeah. But we kind of did it the other way around. We looked at what needs to be done, and then after about 9 months or so, we realized that we needed a polyester recycling technology, so we then spent quite a significant amount of time scouting for that technology and trying to find the right cooperation partner. So many realizations along that path. I guess one, I've been in many roles in companies as you know, and as CEO, but as founder, there is, I guess, that little bit of extra heart and passion in it.
Does it feel like your baby, this one?
It feels like multiple people's baby, luckily, because I don't think a company should be one person's baby when you're trying to maximize impact. But I definitely feel like it's definitely partly my baby. But I'm sharing it with many other great people now, which is humbling, but great. No, so I care a lot about the company.
I can tell.
But it's also nice to find that, to share that responsibility and feeling with other people.
Yeah. Maybe doubling down a little bit on kind of polyester, because I think everyone knows a little bit about like textile and garment industry being horrible in terms of environmental footprint. But what's specific about polyester? Like, why did you choose to go down that route?
We had a very scientific approach when we were trying to look at how do we maximize impact in the textile industry. So we looked at the entire value chain. And pretty rapidly, we realized that if you want to maximize CO2 abatement potential, then polyester is the thing to go for, because it is the world's biggest fiber. It's actually 57% of global textile fibers. Many people think it's cotton, but it's not. And it's growing more than the market, so it's taking market share for every year because it has just superior performance parameters connected to it. So 57% of the world's textile fibers, and it's made from oil. So it's oil-based, and that obviously we know is not a good thing climate-wise. The thing that is also interesting is that there's something called recycled polyester, which is actually something that is not, it is recycled, it's made out of plastic bottles. And interestingly, there's been so much demand for recycled polyester that they sometimes produce new bottles to make into polyester. But the problem is that the industry obviously needs a circular solution. We need to find textile-to-textile solutions for the textile industry to make it sustainable. And what is called recycled polyester is not one of those.
Okay. So we shouldn't be proud of ourselves when we buy garments which says recycled polyester today.
That has a lower footprint than virgin polyester, but it doesn't actually solve the fundamental problem. Less than 1% of the world's textile fibers are recycled today, and it's such a huge sector. So we need to, our part of our vision is that we want to see every textile fiber see a new day, because we need to create that circularity. And the textile industry needs to close its loop, and the bottle industry actually needs to close its loops, because bottles need to keep being bottles. Making bottles into textiles is actually a downgrading, and then it ends up in the landfill anyway, so that doesn't solve the long-term problem.
No. So as you can probably tell, like, this is a quite complex problem with quite a few kind of steps and things to take into consideration. It's not an easy challenge that you've taken on. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more, kind of what are the key risks as you see it, maybe also specifically from an impact perspective, and how you've kind of taken on to mitigate against those?
Obviously, this is an industry that's been around for very many years. The textile industry is old, and it's very, very fragmented, and it's very global. So all that obviously makes it a difficult industry to address. But we're trying to come up with a solution that is plug and play, so that it can actually be, it's a material. Polyester is polyester, right? So our recycled material will be just like virgin polyester in terms of its ability to be used in the industrial processes where it's used today. So it's supposed to be a plug-and-play product going into the existing value chain. So we don't need new spinning, for instance. So it can go into existing spinning infrastructure. And I think that's very key when you're trying to change a pretty traditional industry, that you can actually work with the players in the industry rather than replacing all of them, because there will be enough resistance anyway to change. And if you're going to replace them all, then there'll be even more resistance.
Changing topics a little bit. We've concluded before that you're not the typical startup founder, and I don't think Syre is the typical startup. Maybe you could share a little bit with the audience, like, what has the last 18 months been like? What have you done? Like, could you talk about like how you built the team and so on?
Yeah, I guess it took us. The launch was 3 years ago, and then it took us a while, basically doing some kind of desktop analyses and then scouting for the technology. But about 18 months ago, we started building the team in a serious way. And
how was that like?
Oh, I love that.
Tell us. What's the secret?
To me, building the team and finding these amazing people is just the most fun thing. And seeing how people are attracted to impact ideas these days. I think the talent that is attracted to an impact startup is just superior to what you see in a traditional company. Just there's that extra caring for what you do. Not only are people smart and driven and all that, they exist elsewhere too. There's that extra kind of passion in what they do, and really working hard to find those new solutions, because it is hard. It's not easy to build a startup and scale up, as we know. So how did you go about? Like, did you first hire the CEO and then the rest of the team, or like how did you build? No, I didn't actually, because we were when we were scouting for the technology, one thing we realized we needed pretty early was experience of building these factories. And I'm a finance person by background, so that's just not my skill set. So the first thing I felt that I needed was someone who could actually go in, look at the capex, and so, because we needed to know that what we were looking at was a scalable technology, and that we could produce polyester at a cost and quality that the industry needs. So the first person was actually. I fluked it a bit, I must say, but I found out that the guy who's built the first kind of demo and then scale up of a textile recycling technology in Europe, he had just quit his job. So got a little bit of luck as well, right? You do need a bit of luck. So he was the first one to join the company, and just helped us during that technology assessment phase as well to make us more comfortable that we had the right technology to work with. So he was the first guy, and then there were another couple of people, but of course, who's going to be the CEO? I knew I didn't want to, and I shouldn't be the CEO of the company. And obviously the CEO plays an extremely key role in building a great company. So that one I did worry a bit about, because I think what I felt that I was looking for, I was recruiting more for personality than from exact CV. So I wasn't sure where the person I was looking for was at that point. And I preferably wanted to find someone who has both been in a startup scale-up environment, but also has seen a larger company, given that we were aiming to go big very quickly. And in the end, I fluked it there too. I think it was like person number 2 or 3. I got a recommendation via someone I trust to, and he was like, this guy, I think he's really good. So I reached out and we had coffee like the following day. And there was something in me that just said, maybe this guy is it. And he's now the CEO. A really great guy, Dennis Nobelius. He was then the COO of Polestar when we met first.
It's a quite different industry, actually.
Quite different. But he'd taken Polestar from about 1,000 employees to 4,000. Before that, he'd been CEO of a software startup and taking that from 0 to 800 people globally. And before that, he was at Volvo working in both manufacturing and sales and so on. So he had both large corporate and startup background, and in the end he decided to take on the role, and he joined September last year.
Cool.
So
then you had a technology, you had a team, needed capital maybe
capital.
Yes.
No, it's a capital intense business that we're building, and obviously I believe a lot in partnerships. When you want to do something like this, you can't do it on your own, which is why I said it's partly my baby, but it's definitely other people's baby too. And H&M was a key partner from day one. We would not have found the technology or managed to build the knowledge. They gave us generous access to their entire team globally, so we could reach out to whomever and get a good response. But then H&M can never supply the big money, and also we wanted to find a bunch of customers both outside H&M, but also outside the fashion industry.
Yeah, because maybe let's double click on that. Because maybe people think that polyester is in garments only, but it's actually like not at all the full truth.
No, and that's why we think polyester is so interesting to work with, because fashion is a big user, but then you have other companies like the car industry. They use heaps amounts of polyester that goes into every car. And now we do have people like Volvo Cars, and we have also Volkswagen on our cap table indirectly. And also we have IKEA indirectly via IMAS Foundation on our cap table, because the home interior segment is a huge user of polyester. Yeah. So we want to think broadly and not only be a fashion company. That was for sure. Yeah. And you raised an oversubscribed round in a quite challenging year in terms of raising capital. We did. We raised $100 million, and we finalized that in early last year, which was super exciting, and very few people have done that in the textile industry before. But we managed to find, I must say, the best partners. I was lucky again. See, it's a lot about luck, but I ran into TPG Rise Climate actually early on. That was before the summer of 23. I actually met them, and it turns out that they had looked at this exact space, polyester recycling, because they were thinking that they believe in circularity, and they were saying there has to be a big industry built around polyester recycling. So they'd been considering building something themselves, but in the end we met and basically had a long process and negotiation, of course, but then they came in as the lead of the round that we did. And privileged to have such an amazing kind of partner with global reach. They have amazing network in India, in Asia, in the US, in just kind of any market that we want to find access to. So. And apart from that, so it was them, it was Norrsken VC, very happy to have you guys on board. Giant Ventures came in, Volvo Cars, we had IMAS Foundation, and a few others. So
not your typical first financing round, but...
no, not your typical.
No, but not the typical startup either, as we concluded. Maybe you've talked a little bit about kind of the importance of collaborating and kind of finding allies when you're taking on such a big challenge. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on that and how you think about that now when you're going into actual, production and setting this whole thing up.
Sorry, how we take on the...
How you think about the building allies and coalitions in this industry?
I think it's extremely crucial because you can't know everything as a startup. Now we're almost 40 people in the company, but still obviously very small.
Yeah.
So the partnerships that we have are invaluable, both in terms of reach. Like I said, TPG has this global reach, H&M with all the fashion industry knowledge that we can access.
Yeah.
But we're also talking to like yarn spinners, to other polyester players. We need to find innovative ways of working together. And I think one example of that is last week we announced that the blueprint factory that we're right now building in the US, we're going to partner up with a company named Selenis, who have existing polymerization capacity in the US that has been idle there.
Yep.
So we're going to build our depolymerization unit just next to them, plug it into their polymerization unit to gain speed and to also, obviously it's more environmentally friendly if you can actually use existing infrastructure that is there and existing knowledge, because they are very knowledgeable in polymerization, and therefore we think that we will gain speed and increase our impact by going that way.
Such a win-win situation, I'm guessing, also from their perspective. And maybe just to draw some parallels from some of the other industrial projects that you've been part of, including Northvolt and Stegra, as you mentioned initially. Like, what have you learned from these journeys that you're now taking on board for the Syre journey? Are there things that you're kind of fully bringing on board? Are there things you're changing a little bit? Yeah.
Definitely, or it's a privilege to have worked with a company like Northvolt for the last almost 8 years, like I have, and then seeing Stegra also kind of come from an idea about green steel to now being in the middle of building our big steel mill up north. So many learnings in so many areas. I guess to bring out a couple of examples, thinking about your customer journey and how to work closely with your customers, how to think about contracts with the customers, the off-takes, and so on.
Maybe can you share a little bit about, because you explained to me before, like the difference between LOIs and off-takes and why it's such crucial that you get this part right. Maybe for people in the audience that could be interesting. To me anyway, a key difference is when you want to find your product market fit as a startup, I think working closely with the customer is invaluable in every way. It's just that in my mind anyway, there's so many companies and large corporates that want to do an LOI with a startup because they have absolutely nothing to lose. They'll learn a bit and they can be semi-engaged when they do that. If you instead say we have to have a bankable offtake, if you get them across the line to actually want that, you get so much more detailed input on what they actually need, because they need to commit to buying what they write in the contract. An LOI is more some kind of optionality for them, and therefore I think the actual feedback that you end up getting as a startup in terms of, in detail, what do they need of your product or service is just a lot more high level if it's an LOI. So I think the offtake discussion, albeit painful, which it almost always is very, it's invaluable in terms of your own learnings as an organization. And how do you actually get that offtake in place? You said it's not easy, but are there certain tips and tricks that you can use? I think having very senior buy-in from the company that you want to enter into the offtake with is crucial. Because normally they'll send you down to if it's the head of sustainability or head of purchasing or something, where you end up starting the negotiation. And you will normally get stuck because you are demanding something that they don't normally accept, you want to have a take or pay, or you want to have more binding terms and more binding commitments. And then the purchasing department will often say, no, we don't do that. And then I think you need the senior buy-in, because then you need to make that call to the people who think of this in a more strategic way and say, look, now we're stuck here and we need this to actually get going. Otherwise, there will not be a Syre if there's not an offtake. And then, so it's this kind of push and pull to make sure that the head of purchasing then gets the support from the management team to actually deviate from what they normally do. And it takes a while, so it's not a good recommendation to only have a few weeks when you're going to try and do it. I think it took us a year with H&M, and then they were anyway our close partner. So. Got you. Okay, so working closely with the customers and kind of trying to get them on board on offtake agreements to de-risk. That's like one key learning, one thing you're bringing with you from the previous projects.
Yeah.
Are there other learnings or things you're kind of copy-pasting to Syre?
One thing I'm obsessed with is building the team.
Yeah.
I was saying that before, that it's both such a fun thing, but also so extremely crucial. I think one thing that we do differently at Syre compared to other typical startups, and we've done the same at the Northvolt and Stegra and so on, is that we mix the typical startup profile of an employee with the more typical large corp person. Of course, it takes something from a large corp person to actually want to take the risk to join a startup, but there are actually plenty of those when you look in the climate space, because people do want to be part of the change. But I think when you mix those two profiles and you get some of the really experienced people who have 20, 30 years of experience from the big industrial and who've done these kind of journeys before in terms of building a factory or scaling a factory or establishing customer contracts and it's just worth a lot to have that, to not have to make every mistake yourself from day one.
Well, that makes 100% sense.
So that kind of a senior team, and like I mentioned the CEO profile, the profile of Dennis, he has 30 years of experience almost from previous jobs, and that is worth a lot, both in terms of leadership and in terms of actual execution skills.
And how do you build that culture that attracts both the startup profiles and also the, I guess, adventurous corporate people? Like, is there a certain kind of values or so that you're striving for to get that good mix?
I'm not sure if it's certain values. I think just what's been cool to see over the last, 5-7 years is how impact companies attract amazing talent of all sorts. I think impact companies have such a competitive edge there that people want to, and I said that before, people want to be part of the change. People see, there's so many people who are worried with what we're seeing in the world in general that you want to be part of solving it rather than sitting in a more predictable environment where you're actually not part of the solution.
No, fully agree. When it comes to like building Syre, and I know Syre is to some extent more modular than previous projects. Could you maybe also expand a little bit on that and how that maybe helps you in fundraising and de-risking?
Building huge plants like we're doing in Stegra is obviously complex in itself. It's one huge project that you just have to get right. In Syre, we have the privilege of an industry with a slightly different logic. It doesn't actually make sense to build one huge plant because the scale economics look different. But rather, what we want to be part of is closing each regional loop in terms of its waste and also its need for textiles. So for us, it will be... We think we will build big factories at 250,000 tons per year, most likely, which is huge, don't get me wrong. But it's still a way more manageable CapEx burden per factory. But then instead we will build multiple factories, but they will look pretty much the same in every geography. So
and you can modify a little bit along the way.
You can tweak a bit, and hopefully make it gain those kind of 10-15% in CapEx improvements and so on, plant by plant. But it's still a modular approach. We will do one at a time, and therefore we can also choose to finance one at a time. And we can even go down to finance line by line, actually, is another, depending on what the market is saying then and what customers want and so on.
Exactly.
So it's a very flexible model in that way.
Well, that must be quite helpful in today's market.
Very.
And I'm sure many founders in the audience here can relate to this question in terms of, like, you're raising, or you're taking on a big challenge. You will be raising a lot of capital, we can all assume. Like, how do you balance raising capital and building a business? Like, how do you make time for both? Like, how do you decide what to do when?
I think having a super strong finance team is one of those learnings, to have people who can work with this on an ongoing basis. And then I think, obviously, we have to relate to the world around us in terms of how quickly we go and how much risk-willing capital is there. I think 5 years ago, the world was completely different. Then people were kind of throwing money at startups, and you could spend a bit on however you wanted, more or less. But now you're more heavily scrutinized where you spend your money and how, and what kind of risk an investor is taking. So I think these kind of modular approaches and being able to showcase your KPIs and delivery on those KPIs and kind of get financing gradually is a strong advantage today, which wasn't quite the same 5 years ago. I think you have to just listen to your investors, listen to be aware of what's happening in the market, but be super focused on your own execution and delivering on your numbers. Because if you deliver on your numbers, I think you will normally be able to raise capital.
Indeed. Maybe if we take a little bit of a look into the future, 5 years from now, where do you think Syre will be?
5 years from now, we have multiple large-scale factories up and running. We hopefully have another few large-scale ones in the plan. There are more players like Syre doing this, hopefully, because the world needs it.
And that's something you would encourage, right?
Very much so.
Yeah.
We need more players to do this than only us. We want this to become a true industry and a real supplier to the textile industry. I hope we see that we're up and running. This is a real industry. No one questions anymore whether circularity is the thing. We are a plug-and-play solution into all these industries. And recycled polyester, people have understood what that is, and circular polyester is just something that everyone understands, that circular polyester is the solution this industry needs.
So we know what to look out for on those tags. You've taken on electrification, steel, and now textile. What do you think is the next big thing that we or you should tackle?
I think for very many years, climate will be one of those things that we will need to address. And obviously now people are more working on trying to prevent CO2 from being emitted and so on. We might also have to look at solutions for actually protecting ourselves against what's happening, because it's going too slowly, right? We all know that. So let's see what that means. Not a very positive one maybe, but I think entrepreneurs, they're normally part of the solution. So I think entrepreneurship can also be part of solving that solution. And then slightly bigger picture, I guess, if you look at Europe, I belong to those who are quite concerned on where Europe is heading and our competitiveness. And I guess the election results tomorrow make it clear that the US will be going its route, and China and Asia are going their way, and Europe is a bit stuck in the middle. So I think we need to create an even better climate for entrepreneurs here. We need to try to compete with the US in terms of that, because we are far behind. I think we need to see startups in the security space, climate I mentioned, in just the theme of European self-sufficiency in supply chains, in data, in everything is going to be very important. So I'm definitely hoping to see a bunch more cool companies start in that space, and I hope to support some myself. Or even create one, who knows?
Could we even look at this kind of European self-sufficiency? Could we see that as an opportunity, do you think, from our perspective, in terms of like building innovation? We need to now really join forces. Do you think we could see it as an opportunity? Absolutely. I think it's a threat if we don't do anything. But if we turn it into an opportunity and we have all this kind of creativity that entrepreneurs bring come into it. What I think we also need to see, though, is both that the kind of public and private sector in Europe decide to support these entrepreneurs, because we all know that these solutions will also require, many of them will require a lot of money. And it can't only be US capital coming into them, because then they will be they don't care about European self-sufficiency. Exactly. So once it's off trend, they will back off a lot more. So I think we also, I'm hoping, I was in Paris a couple of weeks ago. I met with BPI France, for instance, and just seeing how they have had which is a public-private cooperation, and just having a really strong standing in the startup community, both through indirect and direct investments. I think we need to see more creative partnerships like that to really build that European ecosystem. Again, kind of comes down to collaboration. Very much. So our time is running towards the end, but I wanted to ask you as a last question, like you've worn probably the hats of most people in this room, like being an investor, being a founder, being a corporate leader, etc. Like, what would be your call to action? Like, what can we all do to kind of help progress in the right way? I
I certainly hope that everyone from whatever hat we have, and obviously I have many that I can choose between, but I think we all just need to make sure that we help these companies trying to solve the biggest challenges that we have. And we can do it in different ways and different roles, but it actually takes, entrepreneurs cannot solve it themselves. Big corporates will certainly not do it. But if big corporates decide to truly, in a creative way, help entrepreneurs, they can have huge impact. So I think just kind of finding those ways and maybe not being as focused on me, myself, and I, but rather focused on finding the solution. I think we all can do a lot and so much more than we're doing now. And I think we need to.
Super. Thank you so much, Sanna, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you.